how it all went south.
It's March 11th, 2005, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. On trial for rape, kidnapping, and assault, Brian Nichols escaped a courthouse in Atlanta, killing 4 people, including a judge, court reporter, deputy, and U.S. Customs agent during a violent rampage. Nichols then left for Duluth, Georgia, and held Ashley Smith, a widowed mother, hostage in her apartment. Through a series of conversations, Smith gained his trust, convincing him to surrender. Nichols was arrested, and in 2008, after a lengthy trial involving debates over his mental health and systematic failures, he was convicted on 54 counts and sentenced to life without parole, narrowly avoiding the death penalty. His case became one of Georgia's most high-profile legal battles, prompting discussions about justice, rehabilitation, and courtroom security. And I remember it well. It was absolutely havoc right downtown, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Live from 800 East Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, I'm Jason Hoke, that's Sean Kipe, and this is How It All Went South. So our story about Brian Nichols and this violent rampage through the courthouse downtown is only 3.5 miles away from where we're recording today, right 1 block from the Georgia state capitol. Now, the hallowed halls of a courthouse are among the most sacred of institutions we have here in America, where judges and juries review evidence of a case under the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. It's also a place full of security and security measures, of precautions taken to make sure those that may have already committed horrific crimes don't do so in this setting. And yet, when Brian Nichols went on his killing spree in 2005, right here in Atlanta, everything changed. And I remember this happening, and we'll get into the details of his path through this, but this was both a cold-blooded killing in the courthouse, in the courtroom, but it spilled right out into traffic, right on MLK Boulevard. I mean, right here, right by the Capitol, playing out in real time. And some of the people, I think, hijacked 5 cars, and a couple of them were actually Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporters. Down covering stuff. Like, this was not just in the middle of a parking lot somewhere. Right. It happened right in the heart of our city.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure I've heard of this, back in the day. I didn't live in Atlanta then, but I mean, it's only happened so many times that someone in that setting has killed a judge. Yeah. It just happened, I say that, and it happened recently.
Yeah. Which is
fairly recently, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the reason I wanted to cover this is because it was just one of those things that I hadn't thought about in a while, and I thought deserved another look. But I also think it plays differently here in Atlanta than it might for someone living on the other side of the country, other side of the world. And so, like, you were not here at the time. You either don't really remember it, didn't deep dive on enough, and it's worth another look at actually what happened that day. So that's why we're here, going deep on this. So starting out the story, Cynthia Hall, 51, she was a veteran deputy with 16 years of experience, stood watch over Brian Nichols, 33, as she had done many times before. The 33-year-old was being retried on rape, kidnapping, and assault charges of his ex-girlfriend, an ordeal that became a thing when he discovered she was dating the minister of the church the couple attended. Nichols had kidnapped his ex-girlfriend, duct-taped her, put a can of lighter fluid on the counter, and told her he would set her afire if she tried to escape. He then videotaped her naked, forced her to perform oral sex, and raped her as part of his healing from being dumped by her. Nichols was in custody at the Fulton County Courthouse, where his first trial had ended in a hung jury. Over the course of his trial, Deputy Cynthia Hall and Nichols had developed an unusual rapport. Hall, a mother herself, had shared stories about her children, her life, and even discussed Nichols' case with him. She prided herself on being a good judge of character and had come to trust Nichols in a way that most wouldn't. Now, that morning, Nichols awaited what was likely the final day of his trial. Nichols projected a calm demeanor, a stark contrast to a man on trial for such serious charges. And this wasn't his first trial attempt. A previous one had ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury. Now, perhaps it was that misplaced trust or the many ordinary conversations that they shared that led Cynthia Hall to bypass the standard precautions that morning. Despite the discovery of hinges hidden in Nichols' shoes just the day before, Hall didn't require him to wear the customary leg shackles for high-risk detainees.
Whoa, huh? Hinges?
He had hinges, I think like door hinges, like in his shoes, tucked away, as like a potential weapon or escape mechanism.
Gotcha.
So even as that happened, right? Even as she discovered something, to her, he didn't seem like a threat. But Nichols had other plans. So thinking about this, how, as a deputy, as a security officer, how are you ever lulled to sleep by someone like this?
Where does an inmate get door hinges?
I mean, how do inmates escape from Alcatraz, right?
Well, I can tell you that. There's a movie.
Yeah.
Explains it all. Paper
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, whatever. But yeah, to your point.
The point is we have no idea how they get them, but like everything is a weapon, a shank or whatever, right? Like this is how it goes.
Put a door hinge in a sock. I bet you'd do some damage with that thing.
Yeah.
Can we try it on Shane? Just your leg. Like on your a soft one. Small hinge.
I have one in my ankle.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we can't do it on Shane.
Yeah, he's a little gimpy about it.
Yeah. We want to leave you with one good leg, Shane.
Just one. I'm good.
So around 8:45 a.m., Hall prepared to escort Nichols when he seized the opportunity to overpower her, leaving her unconscious on the cold tile floor. He beat Hall so severely that she suffered brain damage and permanent vision loss in her right eye. And so there is surveillance video that catches this. It lasts about 3 minutes. And Hall had actually removed the handcuffs from Nichols at the time. So he's got a weapon and he's free and clear. Wow.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. In 2005.
Yeah.
Like you would, this is 1972. I could believe that would, all right. It's the 70s, but in 2005, I mean, enough crazy stuff has happened in
It, by the way, in big city metro Atlanta, not like the little courthouse in Monroe or whatever, right? Like it's different. There's no Barney Fife, guy up there managing things. Like they take it very seriously. And the courthouse is massive downtown. It actually got a little bit turned around when I was there.
Big,
it's huge. So with Hall out of the picture, Nichols quickly took her keys and gun, unlocking the storage box where it was contained. So the gun was in a storage box. He got the keys, opened it, and now had that gun. So now armed, he changed out of his prison jumpsuit and into civilian clothes. So now he doesn't look like a prisoner anymore.
Where'd he get the clothes from?
I don't know. He's free and clear. He figured it out somehow. Once dressed and disguised, Nichols crossed the narrow sky bridge into the adjoining building, heading directly to the courthouse. So if you've been downtown in Atlanta, you know that there's a series of sky bridges that cross a lot of these things to let pedestrians go without having to go all the way down, all the way up and stuff. Yeah. So this is one of those. So Nichols was in search of Judge Rowland Barnes, who was presiding over Nichols' rape trial. Nichols entered the judge's chamber, where Deputy Sgt. Grantley White, the bailiff, had just returned with breakfast. When Nichols confronted him, White tried to swipe the gun from Nichols' grip, but missed. Nichols disarmed the deputy, taking his gun and handcuffs, which he used to restrain White and other staff in the chambers. So he's now, the bailiff is out of the picture. He's handcuffed, and he's taken his weapon too. Then Nichols demanded to know where the judge was.
Wow, yeah, what do you do in that situation? Do you tell him? You know, this guy's obviously crazy. You know, if you don't, is
With
he
a
gonna
gun.
shoot me? Yeah, that's what I mean. You know, but do you tell him and he's gonna go try to kill the judge?
Yep. Well, what's pretty clear is if confronted with something, he would absolutely kill the person who
Well,
does
that's what
that.
I'm. Yeah, that's what I mean. But
That
I'm
becomes
just
clear later on.
I'm just thinking of that. You know, the bailiff or you have a guard in the. You know, which he probably got the jump on him. I mean, he probably it wasn't like a showdown.
It was kind of like, where is he? And they're like, over there. You know, like there's probably only a couple doors from that. So court was actually in session that morning, and Judge Barnes was presiding over a business lawsuit. Known for his wit and affable demeanor, Barnes enjoyed peppering the proceeding with his trademark good-natured humor, cracking a joke in the courtroom. Unfortunately, that joke and those words would be his last. So co-workers, judges, lawyers, and friends would later describe Judge Barnes as someone who loved his country, was generous and thoughtful as a judge, and had no malice towards Nichols before this event. Fulton County DA Paul Howard said Barnes was nice to him, describing Nichols. So back to the events. As proceedings continued, a young lawyer, Richard Robbins, was arguing that civil case in front of Judge Barnes in the courtroom that day, and noticed a well-dressed man enter the courtroom from the judge's chambers. Assuming he was courthouse staff, he thought nothing of it. It wasn't until Nichols stepped onto the bench behind Judge Barnes that they knew something was wrong. So without warning, Nichols extended his right arm and fired directly into the judge's head. The courtroom erupted in screams as Barnes collapsed, lifeless. Now, Robbins, that attorney, had been in front of the judge that day, said about Barnes, "I felt he was dead instantly. Then I looked to see where this guy came from." He said, "After having shot the judge, he turned the gun on me. He paused. I looked at him." Nichols was calm, but he didn't pull the trigger. Now, during that calm, Robbins said it appeared Nichols was going to calmly and accurately kill everyone in that courtroom. So a very measured, I'm going to point the gun right at you and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to extend my arm and kill you. So he was very controlled in this even after he killed the judge.
Which is a thing in its own to say. I mean, that's like sociopathic. I mean, you think that any average person, for whatever reason, even if you got to the point of doing that, you know, to be able then to keep your composure and your thought process of continue on, you know, kill more people or
like controlled derangement.
Do this. Yeah, it's crazy that, you know, to be in the head of somebody like that.
Yeah, so during that pause, Robbins ran out of the room. Like part of what you need to do when you're threatened with, you know, your life is being threatened, they say.
Fight or flight.
Yeah. And so he got out of there. And so Nichols then aimed his gun at court reporter Julie Brandau, ending her life with a single shot to the head also.
Why the court reporter? That's as opposed to and I'm not that it matters in that sense, but I just mean like, as opposed to from his perspective, that
she could have been the closest person, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, they're very close to where the judge sits.
Yeah,
could have been something like that.
Crazy that he had on the attorney.
Yeah,
you would think the mind of this guy. I'm trying to put myself in his shoes.
Right,
judge, attorneys, court reporters is there.
Right,
Yeah. Wow.
Maybe making an example. So it's 8:55. Just 10 minutes has elapsed. As all of this has happened. And so it happened so quickly, let's go through the events again. He's with Cynthia Hall, the deputy, the one that he instilled trust in, and they had this, relationship of getting to know each other. He, beats her, takes her keys, gets the gun. Then he goes and he finds the bailiff, and, it's like systematically.
Yeah, he thought this through.
Yeah. And he was bound and determined. So I want to step back and actually share a story with you that happened with me recently. I was actually in that courthouse at the end of 2024 working for another podcast. And I actually interviewed a Superior Court judge on the record. And I was pretty proud of the fact that I was able to do that. And I showed up probably like 4:30 or 5 o'clock that day, and they actually took my microphone and all my equipment away, so they didn't let me up with that.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. They let me have my phone though. They let me have my backpack. So I went up there, and there's literally no other court proceedings because it's late in the day. I'm by myself, and one security officer comes out, says hi to me, comes back, gets me, and I go into the judge's chambers. It was like a ghost town. And it just felt, knowing that the Nichols case, that all this had happened with Brian Nichols, it felt really weird how quiet and easy it was to walk around that courthouse.
Well, what I want to know is how, but I was just going to say, like, there's probably some element or some degree of, if that person's at this point or in this section of the building, they're probably allowed to be.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
You know, they've
right?
already been clear.
This is where you enter if you're,
Right.
in the audience of a court proceeding.
Yeah.
It's like,
So your guard wouldn't necessarily be up, like, who is that all the time? But also, how did the guy get into a courtroom with a gun? Through the metal detectors and everything.
who? Nichols?
Nichols.
Well, he stole the gun from Hall.
Right. But he was
He was already inside.
Yeah, okay. So
yeah, he was
didn't have
actually
to go through that.
Yeah, so he wasn't even in his jail cell. He was
Right.
out.
So all in the same building.
Yeah, so he definitely had a plan. It's a massive building, and I know they've got cameras and security things. I'm not saying that there was any lax control the day I was there, but it felt so eerily quiet that I couldn't help think of this case, right? And how easy it might be to be able to sneak in back ways or stairwells or whatever, right? Okay, so he actually escapes through one of those stairwells and ends up outside the courthouse on MLK Drive. Nichols fires a gun into the air, scattering terrified onlookers. And if you've been in downtown Atlanta and you know where the courthouse is, like I mentioned, it's just one block from the state capitol, the Gold Dome. You can't miss it. So this is not, it's just right in the heart of matters at 9 o'clock in the morning. There's a lot of stuff going on. And frankly, there's a lot of security. Deputy Hoyt Teasley, rushing to respond to the panic button call from the judge's chambers, became Nichols' next victim when he shot the deputy 4 times, leaving him critically wounded. And so we'll show some of the video footage on the YouTube version of this episode where you see officers and, police, and you see just like everyone rushed out of all these buildings wanting to know what's going on. And this guy's just right in the middle. He just escapes. He's gone. It's also important to note that Judge Barnes had asked for extra security during Nichols' scheduled testimony that Friday. And it was too late.
Wow. So,
after the break, we're going to share what happened on a 26-hour manhunt for this man, Brian Nichols. All right, we're back, and we're talking about the Brian Nichols case here in Atlanta. Just, again, 3.5 miles from where we're doing this recording today. Happened in downtown Atlanta in 2005. Brian Nichols has killed a number of people along the way. He is now out of the courthouse, and he's disappeared. So what followed was a 26-hour manhunt that seized the attention of the city of Atlanta. Nichols carjacked 5 cars, leaving behind a series of shaken victims. Tow truck drivers, journalists from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and bystanders, abandoning them one by one, all while he was eluding authorities. So he ends up taking a MARTA subway train near Lenox Mall in Buckhead. I know that stop. Mm-hmm. It's an easy one to get to. He ends up taking that. And then officials say they have no news they are willing to share about Nichols for the next 13 hours. Whether that means they know where he is, or they have a lead, or whether they don't know at all, that's not reported.
Yeah, or they don't want people going anywhere near where he might be because of how dangerous he is. Yeah.
Yep. So by the time the sun had begun to set that first day, a $60,000 reward was announced for any information that would lead to Nichols' capture. But Nichols' escape was far from over. Later that evening, Nichols attempted to rob a couple at an apartment on Lenox Road, but fled after a brief scuffle. Making his way to Buckhead, Nichols killed U.S. ICE agent David Wilhelm while he was working on a renovation to his home. He stole the agent's gun, badge, and blue Chevy pickup truck. It's now the middle of the night on March 12th. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Nichols has forced his way into the Duluth apartment of Ashley Smith, a 26-year-old widow and recovering meth addict. This is miles away from Lenox and downtown Atlanta and Buckhead and everything. He has taken a chance to go all the way up to Duluth in this stolen car.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have stopped in Duluth. I would have just, if you think
going.
you're on the run, you keep going.
So Smith had returned home from a cigarette run after her waitress shift had ended when Nichols forced his way inside at gunpoint. Nichols tied her hand and feet and parked himself in the apartment. So, again, it was a big risk for him to go all that way up to Duluth, but here he is in some random apartment of this woman who's just gotten home in the middle of the night after a waitressing shift. Crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the chain of events in a situation like this or in a story like this. I mean, when it's so chaotic and you're on the run and you're just making a decision where you could end up 6 steps later, yeah, it's wild.
Well, there's another unexpected twist here. Of course, Nichols found in Smith a confidant. For hours they talked about God, family, and the choices that had brought them to this moment. Drawing on her faith and her own personal struggles, Smith responded with compassion, sharing her own story. She read aloud from the very popular book, The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, and told Nichols about her late husband, her daughter, and her hope for a better future. Smith later recounted that Nichols seemed to relax, unbinding her hands and feet.
Is this a movie?
It is.
I was going to say, this is for sure the makings of a movie. I mean,
Kate Mara played Ashley Smith. It was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So after 6 a.m., he showed up at the apartment around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. After 6 a.m., Smith said she followed Nichols so he could hide the truck he had stolen, and then took him back to the apartment in her car. Nichols, she recalled, did not take any weapons with him on the trip, and though she had her cell phone, she did not call police. Smith convinced Nichols to let her leave the apartment, and she telling him she was going to visit her daughter. Nichols, perhaps believing her, handed her some cash, promising to stay at her apartment for a few days. Instead, Smith called 911.
Good on her. It's just so good. Where'd this guy get cash?
I don't know.
It's so weird. Like, you almost want to say
we don't know. We can't fill in all the details.
Sure. I'm just saying, you almost want to think that like someone aided him early. You know what I mean? Like he had clothes. And it's probably not the case, but.
Well, I know there was a ton of people that testified in his trial.
Yeah.
When he
stole cash off somebody when he got.
Maybe they came in. I didn't go through. I have a list of
Yeah.
how many people actually tested. One of them could have been someone at a gas station or a diner that he took money from.
Yeah.
Again, remember, it's 26, 27 miles up to Duluth. Lots of things could have happened and no one knew about it.
Yeah.
And it was, early in the morning.
It's just crazy that, I mean, I don't want to give this guy any credit for, because he's obviously a terrible person, but it's wild he had it planned out. He had to have had it planned out very well.
So let me ask you a question. Like that time that he has with Ashley Smith, it's give or take 6 or 7 hours. What would you do if you were,
If I was him?
No, if you were her. Like being bound and, trapped in your apartment. I mean, what would you do?
I have no idea. I think what she did, finding some way to connect with him, and that's what, when there's a hostage negotiator, they find they try to find some way to connect with the person emotionally, whether it's talking about if they have kids, you talk about your kids or their kids, whatever it is, or faith or.
Yeah.
So I don't know. If I was in that situation, that's probably, if you have no other option, wait to get killed maybe, or try to bond with them in some way to gain their trust.
And sometimes it's not ideal, but buying time so that whoever might show up might be able to save you.
Yeah.
You don't know, right? And she does. Who knows if she knew some of the backstory? She wrote a book about this too. So within minutes after she makes that 911 call, a SWAT team descended on the apartment complex. Nichols was taken into custody roughly a day since the attack had begun. So they caught him.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot say that if I were him, I would have, you're holding someone hostage. You've just done all this stuff. You've told them about it. They're aware of it and know that you're on the run, and you let them leave. Almost like you want to get caught. Like, you have to think they're going to call the police.
You can't. It's hard to get into the mind of someone that has done such a heinous act.
Yeah.
The aftermath of Nichols' rampage was a tangled web of legal battles and delays. On May 5th, 2005, a Fulton County grand jury indicted Nichols on 54 counts, including 4 counts of felony murder. The charges also included aggravated assault, kidnapping, robbery, and escape. And a Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard announced that the state would seek the death penalty, and Nichols' trial quickly became one of the most high-profile cases in Georgia's history. However, it was far from straightforward. Nichols pled not guilty. Through all of this, 54 counts, not guilty.
Yeah.
Of note, Ashley Smith's book Unlikely Angel is published by HarperCollins, and the book recounts those 7 hours she spent as Nichols' hostage. And I saw she did a lot of interviews. She did Megyn Kelly. She was on Oprah. Like, it became a really big deal. She was on Good Morning America. And then, this book becomes the film.
Yeah.
7 hours changed her. 7 hours changed her life as a hostage.
Dude, it's so rare that you get to have a perspective from someone like that. So, like, it makes sense to me that everyone wants to interview her, everyone wants to talk to her, and I'm glad she wrote a book, because what an experience that so few people would ever have. I mean, fortunately, but
everyone wants to know what it was
really
like.
Interesting.
And it's also interesting that she was never in the courthouse. She never saw the murders, but it changed her life profoundly. Really interesting. Okay, so next, after the break, we're going to get into the actual trial and all the events that happened that eventually led to his conviction and whether he did receive the death penalty or not.
Imagine the security of that trial.
Yes. High profile. Okay, we're back, and Nichols has been captured. He's been indicted, and we're heading to uber high-profile trial. Everyone wants to know what happens, how this is going to be covered, et cetera, et cetera. So the trial's progress was actually delayed over and over again, further intensifying the public scrutiny. And there was even funding issues that loomed large as Nichols' defense attorneys raised concerns about the cost of a death penalty case placed on the already stretched resources of the public defender's office. Imagine saying that in Atlanta, that you can't even try a death penalty case because the resources here weren't enough. That's wild. In October of 2007, the situation came to a head when Judge Fuller suspended jury selection indefinitely due to a lack of state funding. This claim sparked a contentious debate about the ethics and logistics of pursuing capital punishment in high-profile cases. And at one point, the defense team threatened to quit, citing a lack of adequate resources to mount a proper defense, only further stalling the proceedings. So everyone's complaining about they can't actually get this trial off the ground. The trial finally began in 2008, 3 years after the deadly rampage. When jury selection finally resumed, it garnered significant attention. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Nichols' guilt, of course, including eyewitness testimonies, the surveillance footage that I referenced earlier, and the chilling details of his escape and the events that followed. Complicating matters were questions about Nichols' mental state. His defense team raised concern about his sanity, suggesting he may have been suffering from paranoia or other psychological issues during the rampage. And mental health evaluations were conducted, adding another layer of complexity to the trial, fueling debates about Nichols' capacity for premeditation versus his potential need for psychiatric care. Testimony from Mark Cunningham, a forensic psychologist, added significant weight to the defense's claims. Cunningham testified that Nichols was insane at the time of the killings, driven by a delusional disorder. And so what's really interesting, I was thinking about this you don't really hear the insanity defense as much anymore.
Because I don't think they allow it as much anymore. I think people try it for sure.
Well, I knew there was something. In 2020, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the state of Kansas, saying that their abolishment of their insanity defense was constitutional. So that being kind of a shaky leg to stand on in defense, it's even shakier now.
Yeah, because I think, think about it logically. You went out for whatever reason. You committed some horrible crime like that, committed a murder, went on a rampage.
Yeah. Insanity. Yeah.
And that happened.
Yeah.
That surely happened.
And, most would argue in such a high profile case where a judge and others were murdered, you really can't get away with that, right? Like, no, we're not going to let you get away with that as the defense.
Right. And it wasn't like he shot the judge, stole the gun out of the bailiff and shot the judge, and then they caught him and it was over and he was insane for a second. He continued on and, killed other people. So, yeah, I wouldn't buy that.
So back to Cunningham again. He explained that Nichols believed he was conducting a just war, a rebellion against what he saw as a modern system of slavery embodied by the prison system, and a government he believed had genocidal designs on black people. While Nichols understood he was breaking the law, he felt powerless to stop himself. And this is what Mark Cunningham said in court. If violence can be a righteous tool for the white man, then surely it can be used as a righteous tool for the black man. If violence can be used to murder defenseless women and children in South Africa and Vietnam, then surely it can be used to defend the human rights of dark-skinned people all over the world. And so, listen, we live in a powder keg of race and everything here in Atlanta. We're one, big blended community, and charging the kind of the racial motivations behind this is just a firestorm.
Yeah, and how do you justify violence with violence? Can you? That's always a big question. You know what I mean?
He didn't kill his girlfriend or rape her over.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You didn't. The guy didn't. Remember
why he was there in the first place.
The guy didn't rape his girlfriend because of misjustice in the courtroom.
Lighter fluid and
that's just ridiculous. Like I said, I think that defense for him specifically for that crime is not. I wouldn't buy it.
So think about this kind of defense and this kind of language being used in court every day, and then it being reported out both locally and nationally, and what that means, right? Like that everyone's seeing this. This is not being hidden from anyone. Like, you can understand how that even gets things even more supercharged.
Sure, because you're going to have people that agree with him based off the statement, and that statement may be right.
Right.
But does it justify what he did? And so, then you get more people on both sides of this, and it becomes a whole thing of its own, right?
So Cunningham described delusional disorder as a condition where individuals have a fixed delusion that does not manifest through hallucinations or disorganized thinking. Such individuals may appear otherwise normal, functioning logically and efficiently in most aspects of life, yet remain consumed by their delusion. He read excerpts from a college paper Nichols had written, highlighting what Cunningham described as extreme beliefs that over time developed into delusional behavior. So he had some thoughts way back when he was, in college and way back he had been forming these opinions. Nichols is 33 at the time of these murders. So they were able to go back and see that he was developing these thoughts for years.
Yeah. The delusion builds.
Yeah. The defense also argued that Nichols' troubled childhood contributed significantly to his psychological state. His parents worked long hours and were often absent, leaving Nichols vulnerable to harmful influences. Unable to contest the overwhelming evidence of Nichols' guilt, the defense sought to shift the narrative.
Everyone in this room works long hours and has kids, and I'm just going to say that's suspect to me.
They portrayed him as a man who had been failed by the very systems meant to support and rehabilitate him: education, social services, and the criminal justice system. And so this was what happens in a courtroom full of lawyers, where whether you agree with it or not, it's a no holds bar. I'm going to pull it all.
You pull every bag out of every trick out of the bag for a defense.
Because you have no hope. the evidence was so overwhelming, you've got to frame it somehow.
Yeah. I didn't do it. Oh, okay. Well, he did it, but here's why.
Yeah. So testimony from Ashley Smith revealed more about Nichols' state of mind, too. She recalled that he referred to himself as a soldier for the people and spoke of fighting a demon. To Smith, it seemed he was making reference to a spiritual battle, a theme that resonated with her Christian beliefs. She recalled Nichols seeming to express regret, noting that he believed his parents, likely watching from Africa, would be disappointed in him, to say the least. A videotape confession followed. In a 3-hour interview with Atlanta PD, Nichols explained that he had been provoked into starting a war against the U.S. government that morning, triggered by a variety of factors, including the harsh conditions in the Fulton County Jail and his growing resentment towards the broader failings of the prison system. Fearful of being convicted of rape and life in prison, Nichols admitted that he had been pushed to take extreme actions.
Which that, look, man, there's actually a lot going on right now with the Georgia prison system. And this is now.
I actually have this note, which is, I'm not defending him here, but if you say the words Fulton County Jail, it is bad.
Yeah.
The deaths, the conditions, they almost want to shut the whole thing down and rebuild it and ship everywhere. I mean, it is.
Yeah, it's bad.
And
you've had inmates die.
Yep.
You had an inmate who was found they wouldn't give him medical care, and he had bugs. I mean, he got eaten alive by bugs in the prison.
It's so nasty.
Horrible.
And so it's not a defense of him,
right?
But he makes a point.
He does make a point, yeah.
With regards to Fulton County Jail, that jail in particular is, I wouldn't wish my worst enemy to go there.
Moment of clarity in the sanity. In the insanity, a moment of clarity in the insanity is what I meant.
And I'm sure that that jail was better then than it is today.
That I don't know. Because there's probably more people in it now, right? As Atlanta's grown, but
it's the bugs and it's really disgusting. And here in Atlanta, we were hearing these stories every day.
Well, and that's just Atlanta. I mean, it's all like Georgia's prison system as a whole.
Not great.
Yeah, is there's a lot of things that have happened like that.
So there's another twist to this, another weird twist. A woman named Lisa Meneguzzo, a Connecticut woman who had a romantic relationship with Nichols while he was in prison and helped Nichols plan a bizarre escape while all this was going on, before eventually cooperating with authorities.
Wait a minute. Huh? Was she the accomplice?
No, this is after.
Oh, this is after.
Yeah. This is while he's on trial and all this stuff, or right before trial. So Meneguzzo, who ran a small printing company, had become involved with Nichols after his case had gained national attention.
What? Okay. What the fuck was she thinking?
Hold on. It's coming, man. They began writing to each other, and their correspondence would eventually reveal what they were conjuring up. Authorities first learned about the relationship in March 2007. Remember, this is 2 years after the shooting.
When they monitored every single piece of communication that they ever had.
When a cell phone was found in Nichols' cell and calls were traced back to Meneguzzo. Yeah. Over 58 letters exchanged between Nichols and Meneguzzo were read in court, providing the outline of Nichols' escape plan as he boasted about its brilliance.
Right. Yeah.
I had never heard it. Shannon, you ever heard of this?
So
never heard of this.
The insanity plea right off the table. I told you. Trying to play the system.
Yeah. The plan involved paying his brother, Mark, $15,000 to help him, requiring photographs and overhead shots of the jail to guide Mark through the escape route. Nichols even devised a way to make his escape look plausible, planning to plant a map at the jail and use food wrappers along the Silver Comet Trail, a biking path, as you know, from Cobb County to Alabama, as evidence he'd escaped.
Just food wrappers randomly every trail of breadcrumbs.
I mean,
so funny. But I mean, just think if the guy would have applied himself maybe like to something else, something constructive.
Yeah.
Because he's definitely got determination. I'll give him that.
So a Fulton County jail guard testified that Meneguzzo offered him $78,000 to smuggle Nichols a power drill.
Number one, where are they getting all this money?
She's running a business up in Connecticut. Maybe it's successful.
Yeah,
$78,000 to smuggle in a power drill.
Weird number too. Why not 75? That's so weird. It was like,
and the guard admits
so weird.
Well, wait. The guard admitted she had already paid him as much as $2,600 to keep Nichols' illegal cell phone charged, allowing him to call Manhunt. But the guard balked at the idea of providing Nichols with power tools. Apparently, Manhunt befriended the guard while visiting Nichols and had offered to help him as the guard's house was in foreclosure. The guard needed the money.
Yeah, and that sucks because what do people do when they're desperate? They'll go against what they
very vulnerable people.
Yeah. Not that it's right or wrong, but they'll go against what their character would normally allow if they're desperate, especially for money. Yep. I needed money for some surgery, or for my family, whatever. You'd be surprised what you'd do.
So they bust her.
Yeah.
And she testifies. And it gets crazier. She's called to testify and claimed that she and Tamala Histon, a paralegal assisting Nichols' lawyers, conspired to bribe an unidentified deputy at the Fulton County Jail who Histon was dating. She also testified that the paralegal also smuggled Nichols' letters to her and even sneaked him a book called The Special Forces Guide to Escape and Evasion. This is part of the legal team.
Yeah.
So there's another tie here, right? It's the romantic relationship, the girlfriend, the bribes with the guards, but also part of the legal team, a paralegal on the inside. But Histon denied her being involved in the conspiracy. Manhunt tried to downplay her role, claiming that she never intended to help Nichols escape, but had gone along with his plans to give him a sense of hope.
Yeah.
Even though she gave him they wanted to. Yeah, I was just making him. I want him to
wanted to feel good. I was going to turn him in. I was going to give you guys all this information. What's
$78,000 between friends, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, here's a couple grand to keep his cell phone charged so he can call me.
Yeah, he'll pay it back when he gets out of prison.
Amidst revelations from Manhunt, defense lawyers once again requested to withdraw from the case and for a mistrial to be declared, citing allegations, of course, of misconduct by former and current defense team members as the reason. The judge yet again denied the motion, dismissing it as just a delaying tactic. Ultimately, a jury convicted Nichols on all 54 counts after 12 hours of deliberations. That was pretty quick, leaving little room for doubt about his culpability. However, the jury's decision on his sentence was less clear-cut. After days of deliberation, the jurors could not unanimously agree on imposing the death penalty. As a result, Nichols narrowly avoided execution and was instead sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The outcome drew mixed reactions. For some, the life sentence represented a failure to deliver ultimate justice for the victims and their families. For others, it was a victory for those opposed to the death penalty, emphasizing the importance of ensuring even the most egregious offenders are treated humanely within the bounds of the law. Okay, that's a hill that I don't know that you die on for something like this.
No, listen, we've all seen people who've been sentenced to life in prison or on death row and have been exonerated the DNA evidence has come out 20, 30 years later, 15, whatever. But when you have absolute, there is no question of did this person do this or not.
54 counts, all guilty, 12 hours.
Well, and there were witnesses in the courtroom seeing him kill a judge. It's just like,
right.
You're never going to let this person out of prison. I don't know, man. I'm not saying, hey, cert death penalty to everybody. But there's cases where even if you're against it, you have to go, but that one. Yeah. That one. Well, it was maybe justified.
And it was in some ways a threat to our justice system and a rule of law too. When you think about how we hold a judge and the court and the legal system up in our society.
Well, and the guy is plotting his escape from prison right now. You know that.
Right.
Somehow. I mean, it's not, you know what I mean? He's smooth talking some guard somewhere.
Yeah, no thanks. No thanks. So, interestingly, as we wrap up, I found this sidebar column from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution from 2008, November 2008. 26 hours as a fugitive, 54 crimes in indictment, 54 convictions, 1,337 days from conviction from the crimes, 540 Atlanta Journal-Constitution news stories.
It's a lot. That's a lot.
93 witnesses and 1,181 exhibits. So this is why I don't know how we got the cash.
Sure.
Because I wasn't going to spend the time going through 1,181 exhibits.
Yeah, there's too much in a case like this that's covered that well, and so many things happen. I get it.
So that's the story of Brian Nichols and the horrific events of that day in 2005 right here in Atlanta. Thanks for joining this. This has been a wild one. I'm Jason Hoke. That's Sean Kipe. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the socials. Follow us on our podcast. We've got lots more to come. This has been How It All Went South.